Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the edge of the conference table, her knuckles whitening against the polished obsidian surface. The room hummed with the low thrum of holographic projectors, casting flickering blue light across the faces of the assembled diplomats. Outside the viewport, the stars of the neutral zone stretched endlessly, indifferent to the tension coiling in the air like a spring ready to snap. She glanced at her aide, Marcus Hale, who sat beside her with his usual stoic calm. Marcus was the cautious one, always double-checking protocols, his sharp eyes scanning data pads even now. Across the table loomed the Kroth envoy, its segmented body shifting with a soft chitinous click. The Kroth were ancient, their empire spanning a dozen systems, and this was their third demand in as many cycles: surrender the outer colonies or face blockade. "We have been patient," the Kroth intoned through its translator, the voice a synthesized gravel. Its multifaceted eyes gleamed, reflecting the holograms of disputed worlds. "Your species expands without regard. Yield the resources or we enforce the accord." Elena's jaw tightened. The accord, their euphemism for subjugation. Humanity had clawed its way to the stars through grit and ingenuity, not by bowing to insectoid overlords. She leaned forward, her voice steady. "The colonies are ours by right of settlement. We've offered trade pacts, shared tech. What more do you want?" Marcus shot her a sidelong look, his fingers tapping a subtle warning on his pad, measured response. But Elena wasn't one for caution when stakes hung in the balance. The outer worlds weren't just rocks. They housed families, miners pulling rare isotopes that powered the fleet. Losing them meant blackouts on Earth, rationing that could spark riots. The Krotha's mandibles parted in what might have been a sigh or a threat. "You mistake patience for weakness. Our fleets encircle your lanes. Declare fealty or the stars will burn." The room fell silent, save for the soft beep of incoming transmissions. Elena's mind raced. Diplomacy had failed twice before, each time buying fragile peace. Now, with the Kroth armada massing, surrender wasn't an option. She exchanged a nod with Marcus, who mouthed, "Stall." But stalling wouldn't cut it anymore. Humanity needed a reply that echoed through the void. As the envoy's words hung, Elena felt the weight of billions pressing down. This wasn't just a negotiation, it was the precipice. One wrong word, and the fragile web of interstellar comm would unravel. She straightened, ready to speak, when a priority alert flashed on her console, incoming from Sol Command. Urgent. Her heart quickened. Whatever it held, it might just change everything. Captain Hilaire Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the bridge's consoles a steady drone beneath the rising chatter of her crew. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, painting the void in jagged lines of interference. She'd seen storms like this before, solar flares ripping through the system's edge, but this felt different, heavier, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. "Status on the relay buoy?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Lieutenant Reyes, her comms officer, didn't look up from his panel, fingers dancing over holographic keys. "Still pinging, Captain. But the signal's degrading fast. Whatever hit us came from the direction of the alien probe, right after their transmission." Ilara nodded, though her jaw tightened. The probe had appeared unannounced 3 days ago, a sleek obsidian dart tumbling into Sol's outer reaches. No hails, no scans, just that single burst, a demand in broken English, laced with universal threat symbols. "You wanted war. Prepare." The words still echoed in briefings, fueling debates back on Earth. But out here on the frontier picket ship Aegis, philosophy took a backseat to survival. "Engineering," she patched through. "Mira, talk to me." Shields holding. Chief Engineer Mira Kane's face appeared on a side monitor, smudged with grease and lit by the glow of her engine room. She wiped her brow with the back of a gauntlet hand. "Barely, Cap. That EMP-like pulse fried half our auxiliary systems. We're rerouting power, but if another one hits..." She trailed off, the implication clear. The Aegis was tough, a workhorse of human design, but not invincible. Ilara leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the sensor sweep. A blip, faint, erratic, registered on the edge of the display. Not debris. Something moving with purpose. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7. Keep us between it and the inner system." Ensign Tariq Al-Mansour, the youngest on the bridge, acknowledged with a crisp "aye," his hand steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. The ship shuddered as thrusters fired, a low groan vibrating through the deck plates. Ilara felt it in her bones, the familiar pull of acceleration that reminded her why she'd signed on. Not for glory but for the quiet thrill of holding the line. The blip sharpened into form, a secondary probe, smaller than the first, weaving through the interference like a predator scenting blood. Reyes swore under his breath. Incoming transmission. Audio only. It's repeating the same phrase. Play it, Ilara said, bracing herself. The speakers crackled, then filled with a synthesized voice, cold and mechanical. You wanted war. Prepare. Yield or perish. She exchanged a glance with Reyes, his dark eyes mirroring her unease. Yield? To what? The aliens, whatever they were, hadn't shown their hand yet. But the stakes were climbing. One wrong move, and this could ignite the spark they'd been dreading since first contact rumors surfaced a decade ago. Options? She asked the bridge at large, her tone inviting input without desperation. Reyes tapped his console. We could jam it, but that might provoke them. Or hail back, try to de-escalate. Myra's voice cut in from engineering. Or we blow it to hell. I've got torpedoes hot if you give the word. Ilara considered, the weight of command settling like lead. Blowing it meant escalation, but ignoring it invited vulnerability. The inner system, Earth, Mars, the colonies, lay exposed if this was a precursor to invasion. No, they needed intel, not rash action. Arm defenses but hold fire, she decided. Reyes, open a channel. Let's see if they listen. As the comms linked, the probe adjusted course, closing the distance. Ilara straightened, her voice steady over the open line. This is Captain Ilara Voss of the UNS Aegis. We receive your message. Stand down and state your intentions. War is not our choice. Silence stretched, broken only by the ship's ambient hum. Then, the reply came, not words but a surge of energy that lit the viewscreen in blinding white. Alarms blared as systems flickered, the probe vanishing in a bloom of plasma. Report. Ilara barked, shielding her eyes. Self-destruct, Tarek said, voice tight. It just ended itself. Reyes scanned frantically. No debris signature. Like it was never there. But sensors are picking up a new vector, something bigger heading our way from the Oort cloud. Ilara's mind raced. A trap? A test? The crew's eyes turned to her, waiting. She rose, resolve hardening. All hands, battle stations. Mira, get me everything you've got. We're not yielding, but we're not starting this fight blind. The bridge pulsed with activity, a symphony of grit and focus. Outside, the stars wheeled, indifferent witnesses to the fragile thread humanity clung to. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, clever, unyielding, human to the core. But as the incoming signature grew, Ilara couldn't shake the chill. This reply might end more than one civilization if they faltered. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered with incoming transmissions. The bridge of the UNS Endurance hummed with a tense quiet, broken only by the soft beeps of failing systems. Her crew, Lieutenant Raj Patel at Navigation Dr. Mirachin monitoring comms, and Ensign Theo Grant handling engineering, watched her, their faces lit by the red emergency glow. They'd been pushing the ship hard since the first contact, dodging debris from the orbital skirmish that had scattered the alien fleet like shattered glass. Status on the warp core? Elena asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She wasn't one for panic. Caution had kept her alive through 3 tours on the frontier. But this was different. The Krell's declaration hadn't been a bluff. Their "you wanted war" message had echoed across every frequency, a digital snarl from a species that viewed humanity as little more than vermin infesting their expansion path. Theo wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over the patched-together panel. Holding at 60%, Captain. But if we take another hit like that last one, it'll cascade. We're venting plasma already. His usual wit was absent, replaced by the grim focus of a man who jury-rigged half the ship's defenses from scrap. Mira leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the waveform spikes. Incoming again. It's not just noise this time, it's targeted. They're probing our shields, looking for weak points. She was the cautious one, always double-checking data, but even she couldn't hide the edge in her voice. The Krell ships loomed on the edge of the sensor net, sleek predators circling a wounded prey. Elena nodded, forcing her mind to the plan. Their early gambit, jamming the Krell's command signals with an improvised EMP burst, had bought them time, scattering 2 cruisers into the asteroid field. But it backfired when the feedback loop fried their own auxiliary power, leaving them limping toward the nebula for cover. Now, with resources dwindling and oxygen recyclers straining, every decision carried the weight of survival. Helm, adjust course 0.5 to port. Keep us in the gas cloud, let it mask our signature. Elena's order came sharp, cutting through the hum. Raj complied without a word, his brave hands steady on the controls. He'd volunteered for this suicide run, eyes alight with the fire of proving humanity's grit against the stars. The ship shuddered as a Krell beam grazed their hull, sparks erupting from a bulkhead. Alarms wailed, and Theo cursed under his breath, rerouting power from life support to shields. That was close. They're adapting faster than we thought. Myra's console lit up. Captain, I've got a partial decode on their next transmission. It's not just threats, it's coordinates. They're calling in reinforcements from the outer rim. Elena's jaw tightened. The nebulous swirling purples and golds, beautiful from afar, now felt like a trap closing in. If the Krell fleet regrouped, the Endurance wouldn't last the hour. She scanned the readouts, her mind racing through options. A direct counterattack? No, they'd be swarmed. Evacuation? The escape pods were a one-way ticket to drifting oblivion. Dr. Chen, can we bounce their signal back? Amplify it, make it look like it's coming from multiple vectors. Elena's idea sparked from a half-remembered academy sim, human ingenuity turning enemy tools against them. Mira hesitated, then her fingers danced across the keys. It's risky. We'd have to drop shields for a clear line. But if it works, we could draw them into the dense part of the nebula, let the radiation do the rest. Theo grinned faintly, the first crack in his tension. Hell, Captain, that's the kind of crazy I signed up for. Elena met their eyes, the weight of command settling like dust on her shoulders. Do it. Raj, plot an evasion pattern. We're not running, we're fighting smart. As the ship banked into the nebula's heart, the first false echoes rippled out, ghostly signatures blooming on the Krell sensors. The aliens' response was immediate, a surge of ships veering toward the decoys. But one pursuer broke through, its weapons charging with a predatory whine. The impact rocked them hard, lights dimming as secondary systems failed. Elena braced against the jolt, tasting blood from a split lip. Damage report. Breaches on decks 4 and 5, Theo shouted. Sealing now, but we're losing Atmo fast. In the chaos, Myra's voice cut through. It's working, the main fleet's splitting up. But that lead ship's locking on. We need to, a new alert blared, not from the Krell but internal. The warp core's containment was fluctuating, a ticking bomb in their belly. Elena's caution screamed to abort, but the camaraderie binding them, the shared nod of resolve, pushed her forward. Hold course. We've got this. The nebula enveloped them fully, its tendrils of ionized gas painting the view screen in ethereal fire. Outside, the Krell hunter closed in, oblivious to the trap tightening around its own hull. But as the Endurance's false signals multiplied, a deeper shadow stirred in the cloud's core, a rogue singularity hidden until now pulling at the fabric of space. Elena's heart pounded. Their clever adaptation had lured the enemy, but it might drag them all into the void. Evasive maneuvers. Now. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered. The alien signal had pierced the outer defenses like a needle through fabric, its words echoing in the dim command center. Your expansion ends here. Surrender or face annihilation. That was 3 hours ago. Now the reply draft pulsed on the screen, a weapon forged in code and desperation. Raj leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his usual smirk replaced by a furrowed brow. It's elegant, Elena. Too elegant, maybe. One wrong frequency and it bounces back on us. He was the brains, the one who'd unraveled the xenolinguistics puzzle in a caffeine-fueled night. Witty under pressure, but today his jokes fell flat, swallowed by the hum of servers straining against the incoming probe swarms. Marco paced behind them, his boots thudding softly on the grated floor. Cautious to a fault, he'd argued for evacuation protocols since the first alert. We don't even know if they're bluffing. What if this reply escalates? We've got families down in the habitats. They're not bluffing, Elena cut in, her voice steady though her pulse raced. Brave wasn't the word for it, it was the fire that kept her from crumbling when the colony's fusion core had glitched last year, nearly venting the Atmo. She straightened, eyes locked on the code. Scans show their fleet massing at the jump point. This isn't a negotiation. It's our shot to turn the tide. The plan had formed in the frantic middle watch. Not a surrender, not a plea, but a mirror. The alien's message carried a viral signature, a self-replicating algorithm designed to hijack comms and sow chaos. Raj had reverse-engineered it, twisting it into something reciprocal, a digital echo that would infiltrate their network, exposing their command structure. But the stakes clawed at her gut. One miscalculation, and it could cascade through human systems too, unraveling the fragile web holding New Horizon together. She tapped the execute key, holding her breath. The signal launched, a silent arrow into the void. For a moment, nothing. Then the first feedback loop hit, faint distortions rippling across the display, like heat haze over desert sands. Probes are adapting, Marco said, halting his pace to jab at a secondary screen. His face paled under the blue glow. They're firing countermeasures. Our bandwidth's dropping. Raj was already typing, a blur of commands. Not yet. Give it 30 seconds. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his voice held that sharp edge, the one that had saved them from the meteor storm 2 cycles back. The holographic map updated, alien signatures flickering, then stabilizing. Too stable. Elena's comm buzzed, an urgent ping from engineering. Core temperature spiking. The voice crackled. Something's feeding back into our grid. She swore under her breath, slamming the override. The reply was meant to be contained, a one-way street. But the aliens had layered their trap deeper than Raj's models predicted. Alarms wailed as power conduits overheated, lights dimming to emergency red. Shut it down. Marco yelled, lunging for the manual cutoff. No, wait. Raj's hand shot out, blocking him. The display surged, alien fleet icons wavering, then fracturing. One by one their formations broke, signals devolving into static. It's working. Their own virus is turning on them. Elena watched, heart pounding, as the cascade spread. The holographic probe swarms dissolved into digital debris, the jump point clearing like fog burning off under dawn light. But victory tasted like ash. Below, in the habitats, screams echoed through the vents, power surges igniting fires in the lower decks. The cost was already mounting. A dozen injured, 2 sections sealed off. Marco slumped against the wall, rubbing his temples. We bought time. But at what price? If they regroup. They won't, Elena said, forcing certainty into her tone. She pulled up the damage report, the numbers blurring slightly in her vision. The reply had ended their immediate threat, but the echo lingered in human systems, a ghost haunting the wires. Repairs would take days, trust even longer. As the alarms faded to a low whine, she met their eyes. We adapt. That's what we do. Outside the viewport, the stars held steady, indifferent witnesses to the fragile triumph. But in the quiet that followed, Elena couldn't shake the image of those flickering alien signals, mirrors cracking under their own reflection. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered with incoming data streams. The bridge of the UNS Vanguard hummed with the low thrum of overworked servers, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and faint ozone from the sparking panels. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his fingers flying across a secondary interface, muttering calculations under his breath. If we route the quantum entanglement through the auxiliary relays, we might by another hour before the cascade hits critical. Lila paced behind them, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes darting between the readouts. An hour? That's not enough. The alien signal's modulating faster than we can decrypt. One wrong frequency and we're broadcasting our surrender, or worse. Her voice carried that familiar edge of caution, not fear, but the sharp reminder of protocols they'd all memorized back on Earth. The challenge had escalated in the hours since the first reply pinged back from the void. What started as a diplomatic overture, a bold human message asserting our right to the frontier systems, had twisted into this. An interstellar standoff where the Krell Empire's armada loomed just beyond sensor range, their demand echoing in every comm channel. You wanted war. Simple words, but laced with the weight of 1,000 ships primed for annihilation. Elena's team, stranded on the Vanguard after a hyperspace malfunction, was the closest to the fray. No reinforcements, no retreat. Just them, a battered cruiser, and the ingenuity that had gotten humanity this far. Enough theorizing, Elena said, straightening up. Her decision was made in the cut of her jaw, the steady rise of her chest. Brave wasn't bravado. It was choosing the next step when the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Marcus, isolate the entanglement core. Lila, cross-reference their modulation patterns with the archive. We craft the reply now, something that hits their command net without firing a shot. Marcus grinned, though sweat beaded on his forehead. Clever. Worm their way in with a mirror signal, make him think it's their own echo. But if it backfires? He trailed off, sinking the core with a series of sharp keystrokes. The hologram stabilized, blooming into a web of pulsing lines, human code weaving toward alien frequencies. Lila halted her pacing, tapping her tablet furiously. Patterns match a hierarchical protocol. Their fleets linked, commander to drone. Disrupt the route and the branches fall. But the risk, Risk is the job, Elena cut in, her eyes locked on the display. The first test pulse fired, a silent arrow into the black. Second stretched like taffy. Then, feedback screeched through the speakers, the hologram fracturing into red warnings. Alarms blared, lights dimming as power diverted to countermeasures. Backlash. Marcus yelled, slamming a manual override. Sparks flew from his console, singeing his sleeve. He cursed, batting at the fabric, but kept working. Their firewalls adapted. It's like they were waiting. Elena lunged for the auxiliary controls, her hands steady despite the ship's groan. The Vanguard shuddered, inertial dampeners straining as the alien response rippled through their systems. Not destruction but a probe, invasive and cold, scanning for weaknesses. Lila dove into the fray, her cautious nature flipping to fierce precision as she injected counter-algorithms, buying them seconds. The probe retreated but not before claiming its toll. A secondary bulkhead sealed with a hiss, cutting off access to the engine room. Lost main propulsion, Marcus reported, voice tight. We're drifting toward their picket line. And comms are glitching, half our replies corrupted. Elena exhaled, the weight settling like dust after a storm. The plan had cracked, not shattered, but the cost was real. Isolation deepening, the armada closing in. Yet in the dimming light she saw the spark in their eyes, camaraderie forged in the crucible. Adapt, she said simply. Lila, salvage what you can from the corruption. Marcus, reroute everything to shields. We send the full reply on the next window, refined. They wanted war? We'll give them a conversation they can't ignore. As the ship stabilized, the stars outside wheeled lazily, indifferent witnesses. The team moved as one, hands blurring over controls, voices overlapping in urgent rhythm. Tension coiled tighter, but so did their resolve, human grit turning setback into strategy, one calculated risk at a time. The dim glow of the command console flickered across Lena's face, casting shadows that deepened the lines of exhaustion etched there. She leaned forward, her fingers hovering over the holographic interface, the weight of the fleet's survival pressing against her ribs like an invisible harness. Around her, the bridge hummed with the low thrum of failing life support systems, the air growing thicker with each recycled breath. Jax, the engineer, paced behind her station, his wiry frame taut as he muttered calculations under his breath. Recalibrating the warp coils again. If we push her any harder, she'll tear herself apart from the inside. Captain Reyes stood at the viewport, arms crossed, his broad shoulders squared against the starfield smeared by the pursuing alien armada. The Kaler ships, sleek, predatory wedges of obsidian hull, loomed in the distance, their formation tightening like a noose. It had been 3 days since the reply transmitted, that single defiant burst from Earth, "You wanted war." The words had ignited the stars, or so the intercepted chatter suggested. Now the Kaler were closing in, their weapons priming with a signature that lit up every sensor like a supernova. Status on the evasion maneuver? Reyes asked, his voice steady but edged with gravel. He didn't turn, eyes fixed on the enemy silhouettes. Lena tapped the display, pulling up the NAV projections. 60% chance we'll slip their net if we dump the auxiliary power cores. But it'll leave us blind, no shields, minimal sensors for at least an hour. Her caution was a quiet force, always measuring the odds before leaping. She glanced at Jax, who nodded grimly, wiping sweat from his brow with a grease-streaked forearm. The ship shuddered then, a deep vibration rattling through the deck plates. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing in warning. Incoming fire. Jax shouted, diving for his console. The Kaler had anticipated the feint. Their lead vessel unleashed a barrage of plasma lances, searing lines that grazed the hull and vaporized a section of the outer plating. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, and Lena ducked as shrapnel pinged off the bulkhead. Reyes spun, barking orders. Evasive pattern Delta. Jax, reroute everything to engines, now. He gripped the arm of his chair as the ship lurched, inertial dampeners straining to compensate. The viewport filled with the blinding flash of the attack, the stars blurring into streaks as they accelerated. But the projections didn't lie. One lance clipped the rear thrusters, sending a jolt that threw Lena against her harness. Pain flared in her shoulder, sharp and insistent, but she bit it back, focusing on the readouts. Thrusters at 40%, Jax reported, his wits subdued by the crisis, fingers flying across keys. We're leaking atmosphere from the aft section. If they hit us again. He trailed off, the implication hanging heavy. Lena's mind raced, piecing together fragments of data. The early plan, using the asteroid belt for cover, had backfired spectacularly when the Kaler deployed drones to flush them out. Now, with the belt receding behind them, they were exposed, a lone frigate against a swarm. She pulled up the comm logs, scanning for any sign of the reinforcements Earth had promised in the wake of that fateful reply. Static. Nothing but echoes. Another volley streaked past, close enough to heat the viewport's shielding. Reyes slammed his fist on the console. We can't outrun them forever. Lena, options? She hesitated, the numbers swimming before her. Resource shortage was biting hard, fuel reserves dipping into the red, oxygen recyclers faltering. One wrong choice, and the cost would be their lives, the mission, perhaps the fragile hope that humanity's stand had bought time for the colonies. We could vent the cargo bay, use the debris as a decoy. Buy us a window to jump to the nebula. But it's risky, the Kaler might trace the warp signature. Jax snorted, a spark of his usual sarcasm returning. Risky? That's understatement of the cycle. But hell, it's better than waiting for them to glass us. Reyes nodded, decision made in the span of a breath. Do it. And patch me through to engineering, tell the crew to brace. As Lena initiated the sequence, the ship groaned in protest, hull plates shifting with a metallic screech. The viewport cleared momentarily, revealing the Kaler fleet adjusting course, their sensors no doubt locking on. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the failing atmosphere, each second stretching into eternity. In the brief lull, Lena caught Reyes's eye. His face, usually a mask of resolve, better-eyed a flicker of doubt. The real cost of war, not in grand speeches but in the lives tethered to their choices. The vent doors hissed open on external cams, spewing frozen cargo into the void, a glittering trail that mimicked their signature. The Kaler hesitated, probes darting toward the distraction. It worked, for a heartbeat. Then the lead ship fired again, the plasma lance curving with unnatural precision, slicing through the decoy and toward their flank. The impact rocked the bridge, lights flickering to emergency red. Jax cursed, wrestling with the controls as secondary systems failed. Warp drive spiking. We have to jump now or we're done. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she aligned the coordinates, the nebulous swirling gases a gamble on concealment. Reyes's voice cut through the chaos. Initiate. All hands hold on. The stars warped around them, reality folding in on itself, but not before the final lance scored their hull, a burning scar that promised consequences even in escape. As the ship hurled into the jump, the bridge fell silent, save for the hiss of sealing. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the bridge's consoles a faint vibration through the deck plating. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, showing the Armada's silhouette against the gas giant's swirling storms. 3 days since the reply and the galaxy had gone silent. No probes, no transmissions, just the endless void staring back. Her crew moved like shadows, efficient but edged with the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. Status on the hyperdrive, Lieutenant Ramirez? She asked, her voice cutting through the low murmur. Ramirez, ever the cautious one, wiped sweat from his brow before glancing at his panel. Tall and wiry with a perpetual squint from years in dim engine rooms, he typed a quick query. Online, Captain. But the calibrations are holding by a thread. That EMP burst from the reply's launch scrambled half our relays. One more jump without a full diagnostic, and we might end up as confetti in some nebula. Elena nodded, her jaw tight. Brave didn't mean reckless. She'd learned that the hard way on Titan's ice fields. The reply, humanity's defiant broadcast, a single pulse of raw data laced with every weapon schematic, every tactic, every unyielding promise of retaliation, had been her call. Now, with the alien fleet vanished into whatever fold of space they called home, the cost was sinking in. Earth was blind, defenses stripped to bolster the fleet, and her ship, the UNS Vanguard, carried the weight of First Contact's fallout. A chime pierced the tension. Ensign Kira Patel, the witty comms officer with her quick smile and sharper tongue, leaned forward. Incoming signal, ma'am. Not alien, it's from the rear guard. Captain Hale's group. Patch it through, Elena said. The screen resolved into Hale's weathered face, his eyes hollowed by fatigue. He was the steady type, a veteran of the Mars skirmishes, always arguing for measured risks over bold strokes. Vasquez, we've got company, Hale said without preamble, his voice gravelly. Drones. Hundreds of them, swarming from the asteroid belt. Not ours. They're probing, testing shields. Looks like the bastards didn't take the reply lying down. Elena's pulse quickened. The external challenge she'd feared. Not a full invasion yet, but a resource shortage turned deadly. Their fleet's power cells were at 40%, drained by evasive maneuvers after the broadcast. One wrong move and the drones could pick them off like flies. Formation Delta, she ordered, swiveling to her crew. Ramirez, divert auxiliary power to point defenses. Patel, jam their signals, make them deaf and blind. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos, fingers flying over keys, readouts blooming red and green. Patel smirked faintly even as she worked. If these tin cans wanted a dance, they picked the wrong song. The first wave hit like hail on hull plating. Drones, sleek and angular with pulsing energy cores, darted in from the flanks. Vanguard's turrets spat fire, carving glowing trails through the black. But for every one they downed, two more slipped through, latching onto the rearguard's flanks. Alarms wailed as Hale's ship shuddered on the feed. They're adapting, Ramirez muttered, his caution turning to frustration. Shields modulating to our frequency. We need to. An explosion rocked the deck, lights flickering. A drone had breached the outer hull, burrowing like a parasite. Elena braced as sparks showered from a console. The plan, hold position, pick them off, backfired spectacularly. The aliens' tech was learning, evolving mid-battle, turning their ingenuity against them. Evacuate that section. Elena barked, rising. Grit fueled her steps. Camaraderie would get them through. Patel, Hale. Tell him to fall back to our vector. We're not losing anyone today. Hale's response came terse. Copy that. But, Vasquez, if this is their opening salvo, the real storm's coming. Your reply lit the fuse. She didn't argue. As the Vanguard twisted away from a fresh barrage, Elena felt the lingering consequence settle like dust. The galaxy wasn't just at war, it was unraveling, thread by thread, because humanity had dared to reply. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal as the stars blurred into streaks beyond the viewport. The Vanguard's engines hummed a low, insistent thrum, pushing them deeper into the asteroid belt where the alien signals had spiked like a fever. Marcus was at the console below, his fingers dancing over holographic displays, muttering calculations under his breath. These rocks aren't just hiding their scouts, he said, not looking up. They're using them. Slingshot trajectories, gravitational assists, clever bastards. Lila hovered nearby, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes scanning the latest sensor readouts. We can't afford another blind jump, Elena. The last one cost us the forward array. If we hit a microfragment at this speed. She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy. Another hit could shear off a wing, leave them drifting fuel-less in the void. Elena nodded, forcing her voice steady. We adapt. Marcus, reroute power to the maneuvering thrusters. We'll weave through the densest cluster, force their hand if they're waiting. It was a gamble born of necessity. The alien fleet's vanguard had been picking off human outposts like ticks on a dog, their energy weapons slicing through armor as if it were paper. Earth's reply, that terse, unyielding broadcast, had lit the fuse, and now the vanguard was the tip of the spear, racing to disrupt their supply lines before the main armada arrived. The ship shuddered as they dove into the belt, asteroids tumbling in lazy, unpredictable orbits. Alarms blared softly at first, then sharp and insistent. Marcus swore, slamming a fist on the console. Incoming. Two signatures closing fast, their masking with the debris field. Elena's heart pounded, but she kept her eyes on the viewport, watching the shadows resolve into sleek, predatory shapes. The alien scouts were wedge-shaped, all sharp angles and glowing vents, smaller than the Vanguard but twice as nimble. Evade pattern Delta, Elena ordered, strapping into the command chair. The ship banked hard, gravity compensators whining as they skimmed past a boulder the size of a skyscraper. Lila braced against the bulkhead, her face pale. They're coordinating, one fainting high, the other low. We can't outrun them both. Marcus grinned through the sweat beading on his forehead, a flash of that irrepressible wit cutting the tension. Then we don't run. Elena, give me auxiliary power to the railguns. I've got an idea. He patched into the weapons system, his hands blurring. The plan was simple, desperate. Use the asteroids as improvised munitions, slingshotting fragments into the scouts' paths. Human grit against alien precision. The first scout dove, its beams lancing out in azure streaks that scorched the Vanguard's hull. Elena felt the heat through the deck plates, smelled the acrid tang of melting composites. Fire when ready, she shouted. Marcus triggered the grapples, makeshift harpoons latching onto a nearby rock, and yanked. The asteroid hurtled forward, a gray behemoth smashing into the scout's flank. Metal screamed, the alien craft spinning wildly, venting plasma. But the second scout adapted faster than expected. It looped around the debris, firing a pinpoint shot that severed the Vanguard's grapple line. The backlash wrenched the ship, alarms howling as structural integrity dropped to 60%. Lila lunged to the auxiliary station, rerouting what she could. Shields failing, we need to break contact. Elena unstrapped, grabbing the intercom. All hands brace for impact. Marcus, get us out. He nodded, but his eyes widened at the readouts. The scout was lining up for the kill shot, its weapons charging with a malevolent hum visible even through the viewport. In that frozen moment, Elena saw the cost etching deeper. The outpost they'd lost last week, the crew members adrift now, the fragile hope that humanity's defiance wouldn't end in silence. Marcus punched the thrusters, the Vanguard lurching sideways into a narrow gap between rocks. The scout's beam grazed them, carving a glowing scar along the fuselage, but they cleared it, barely. Debris pinged off the hull like hail as they emerged into open space, the damaged scout trailing sparks in their wake. Elena exhaled, slumping back. Status. Alive, Marcus said, wiping his brow. But we've got a hull breach in engineering. And that thing's calling for backup. I can feel it in the interference. Lila handed her a damage report, her caution winning out in the quiet aftermath. We pushed too hard. Next time it might not be a scout. Elena stared at the stars, the belt receding behind them. The aliens had wanted war, now they were learning its weight. But the Vanguard limped on, one more scar marking the price of reply. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Dr. Ilara Voss's face as she hunched over the cracked interface, her fingers dancing across the haptic keys with a precision born of desperation. Sweat beaded on her forehead, mixing with the grime of days spent in the bowels of the Orion's refuge module. Around her, the air hummed with the low whine of failing life support, a constant reminder that their borrowed time was running out. Captain Reyes paced the narrow corridor outside, his boots echoing like distant thunder, while Engineer Patel muttered curses at a jury-rigged power relay that sparked intermittently. Stabilize the quantum buffer, Patel, Ilara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She didn't look up. Focus was her armor now. The alien signal, the one that had pierced their defenses like a scalpel, still echoed in her neural implant, its translated demand a chilling loop. Surrender your worlds or face annihilation. But they weren't surrendering. Not after the fall of Luna Station, not after the fleets turned to ash. This was their counter. A viral code woven from human ingenuity, designed to infiltrate the enemy's hive mind network and rewrite their aggression from within. Patel wiped his brow with a oil-streaked sleeve, his cautious nature warring with the fire in his eyes. Buffers holding at 62%, document. If we push the upload now, it might fry the whole array. We're talking cascade failure, could vent the module to space. Reyes stopped pacing, leaning into the hatchway. His brave facade cracked just a fraction, revealing the weight of command. And if we wait? That armada hits Earth in 12 hours. Billions gone. We don't get a do-over. He glanced at Ilara, his witty edge dulled by exhaustion. Your virus ready to dance, Voss? Or are we just whistling in the dark? She paused, the code scrolling in her mind's eye like a river of light. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a mirror, forcing the aliens to confront the chaos of their own expansionist drive through simulated human histories, wars, alliances, the fragile beauty of compromise. Earned, not imposed. It's ready, she replied, injecting the final sequence. The console beeped affirmatively, a soft chime amid the chaos. Uploading in 3. Patel, reroute auxiliary power. Reyes, seal the hatch and monitor external comms. Tension coiled tighter as the upload began. The module shuddered, lights dimming to a predatory red. Ilara felt the pull in her implant, the code syncing with her thoughts, amplifying the stakes. Outside, through the porthole, the void stared back, dotted with the debris of their lost fleet, a graveyard of twisted metal glinting under distant stars. Patel's hands trembled on the relay. 70%, 80%, we're drawing too much. Structural integrity dropping. A sharp crack echoed from the hull, frost creeping along a seam. He shot Ilara a look, half plea, half resolve. This could end us before it ends them. Reyes gripped the bulkhead, his voice a low growl. Then make it count. For the yards we lost, the family's waiting dirt side. He activated the comm panel, patching into the emergency beacon. No speeches, just action, their way. At 95%, the alien signal surged back, a psychic backlash slamming into Ilara's mind like ice water. Visions flashed, endless alien swarms devouring worlds, their collective will a monolithic force. She gasped, clutching her temples but pushed through, her grit a shield. The code infiltrated, tendrils of human logic burrowing deep, equations of empathy, fractals of forgiveness amid fury. The upload hit 100%. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping air. The console went dark. Ilara straightened, heart pounding. It's in. Now we wait for the echo. Patel sealed a breach with a makeshift patch, his breath ragged. Echo? Or explosion? Reyes clapped a hand on each of their shoulders, camaraderie a brief spark in the gloom. Whichever it is, we bought time. Earth gets to fight another day. But as the first tremors rippled through the alien network, faint like a distant storm breaking, they knew the cost. Their module was fracturing, adrift in the black. Triumph tasted of rust and resolve, the civilization they saved hanging by the thinnest thread. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the console, her knuckles white against the humming metal. The bridge of the UNS Endurance thrummed with the low growl of failing engines, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Jax, the wiry engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over a makeshift patch on the power grid. She's holding Cap, but not for long. That last volley from their cruisers fried half our relays. Across from her, Dr. Lyra Kane stared at the holographic display, her sharp eyes tracing the alien fleet's tightening noose. The Krell Armada, sleek, obsidian ships like predatory insects, encircled their position in the asteroid field, their weapons charging with that eerie blue glow. Lyra's voice was steady, laced with the caution that had kept them alive through a dozen skirmishes. They're not bluffing this time. Our feint into their supply lines worked too well, now they want blood. If we don't break through to the jump point, we're done. Elena nodded, her mind racing through the fragments of their plan. The Krell had demanded surrender hours ago, their transmission a cold litany of ultimatums. But humanity's reply, broadcast across every channel, had been simple, defiant. You wanted war. Take it. It echoed now in her thoughts, a spark that had ignited this chaos. No speeches, just action. She turned to Jax. Reroute auxiliary power to the forward shields. Lyra, sink the drone swarm to the debris field, make it look like we're scattering. Jax grunted, slamming a panel shut. On it. But if they hit us again, those shields crumple like foil. His hands moved with the precision of someone who jury-rigged half the ship's systems from scrap. Brave in the face of sparks and smoke, but his wit surfaced in the tension. Hell, maybe we can convince them we're not worth the fuel. The deck shuddered as the first Krell salvo ripped through the void, lasers slicing asteroids into glowing debris. Alarms wailed, and Elena braced against the jolt, tasting blood from a bitten lip. Lyra's fingers flew across her tablet, deploying the drones, tiny human ingenuity, packed with EMP bursts and decoy signals. Drones away. They're buying us a window, but it's narrow. 5 minutes to the jump point. Elena steered the Endurance into the fray, weaving through tumbling rocks that shattered like glass under enemy fire. The ship groaned, a beast pushed beyond limits, but she felt the camaraderie in the quiet focus around her. No panic, just the grit of survivors who'd turned a battered cruiser into a thorn in the Krell's side. One drone exploded in a brilliant flash, drawing fire, and for a heartbeat, the path cleared. Then the comms crackled. A Krell voice translated and flat. Primitives. Your reply seals your fate. Missiles streaked toward them, a swarm of death. Evade. Elena barked, yanking the controls. The Endurance banked hard, engines screaming as explosions bloomed behind. Jax cursed, rerouting power on the fly, his face lit by flickering screens. Lyra's plan adapted in real time, her drones herding debris into a makeshift barrier. It held, just barely, as they surged forward. Sweat stung Elena's eyes, but she saw it. The jump point, a shimmering rift in space, humanity's lifeline to reinforcements. One more push. The cost was already high, crewmates lost in earlier fights, the ship a patchwork of wounds, but surrender wasn't in their reply. Not now. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the bridge's consoles a faint vibration against her skin. The view screen flickered with the incoming transmission from the alien fleet, their angular ships blotting out the stars like jagged teeth. Her crew, Javier at tactical, Lena on comms, and old Marcus at engineering, watched in tense silence, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and sweat. You dare challenge the Vexery Dominion? The alien commander's voice boomed through the speakers, translated into a gravelly English that carried an edge of synthetic menace. Your primitive reply has sealed your fate. We come not for conquest, but to erase the insolence that birthed it. Elena's jaw tightened. The reply they referenced was humanity's last desperate broadcast, a unified signal from Earth, laced with every scrap of human knowledge, art, and defiance. It wasn't a declaration of war, it was a mirror forcing the Vexori to see their own aggression reflected back. But the aliens had twisted it into provocation, their armada now accelerating toward Sol. "Javier's status on the array?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "Shields at 80%, Captain. The gravitic disruptors are primed, but if they breach the outer ring..." He trailed off, fingers dancing over his panel. Lena leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the waveform spikes. "They're jamming our relays. I can punch through for a counter-signal, but it'll take everything we've got left." Marcus grunted from his station, his weathered face illuminated by diagnostic readouts. "Engines are holding, but the core's overheating. One more jump and we might not have the power to limp home." Elena nodded, her mind racing through the fragments of the plan. The array, humanity's improvised weapon, a web of satellites repurposed from old mining rigs and defense sats, had been their gamble. It didn't fire lasers or missiles. It bent space, creating pockets of instability that could swallow ships whole. But deploying it meant exposing the Odyssey, their lone frigate, as bait. "Send the counter," she decided. "Flood their channels with the full archive. Let them drown in what they came for." Lena's hands flew across the controls, and the ship shuddered as power diverted to comms. The transmission burst forth, symphonies from Beethoven clashing with quantum equations, tales of resilience from every corner of Earth, a chorus of voices saying, "Asterisk, this is us. Take it or leave it." Asterisk. The Vexori response was immediate, a salvo of plasma lances streaking toward the array. Alarms blared as the first nodes winked out, their fragile frames crumpling under the assault. "Node 7 down," Javier shouted. "They're targeting the weak points." Elena unstrapped, moving to the tactical display. The holographic map showed the fleet closing in, a noose tightening around their position. "Marcus, reroute auxiliary power to the remaining nodes. We need that field up now." "Aye, but it'll fry the secondary systems. Life support might flicker." "Do it." She turned to Lena. "Keep broadcasting. If we go down, make sure they hear the end of it." The old engineer muttered under his breath, but his fingers were already working. A low whine built through the hull as energy surged. Outside, the array's surviving segments glowed, weaving threads of warped gravity that snagged the lead Vexori cruiser. It twisted, hull buckling like foil, before vanishing into a rift that spat debris back into normal space. One down. But the fleet pressed on, undeterred, their numbers overwhelming. Elena felt the weight of it, the billions back on Earth counting on this Hail Mary. Her hand brushed the locket at her neck, a simple chain with her daughter's photo inside. "Hold on, Mia." Asterisk. Another hit rocked the ship, sparks flying from a console. Javier cursed, slapping at the flames with an extinguisher. "Shields failing. Impact in 30 seconds. Evacuate the bridge if you have to," Elena said, but no one moved. They were in it together, grit binding them tighter than any chain of command. Lena's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, their command ship's hailing. It's the Admiral himself. Put him on." Elena straightened, facing the view screen as the alien's face materialized, pale, multifaceted eyes glaring from a ridged skull. "What now? Come to gloat." The Vexori leaned forward, his translation glitching slightly. "Your reply. It shows chaos, not unity. Division. Weakness. Why broadcast such filth?" Elena met his gaze, unflinching. "Because it's real. War isn't clean lines and empires. It's messy like us. You wanted war? This is what you get. A reminder that erasure isn't victory." The Admiral's mandibles clicked, a sound like cracking ice. For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then, his fleet hesitated, the barrage faltering as if the transmission wormed into their collective. But hesitation wasn't retreat. Another wave launched, and the Odyssey bucked violently. Lights dimmed, gravity fluctuating. Elena grabbed the console, her world tilting as the final nodes activated. The space ahead tore open, a maw of nothingness pulling at the enemy vanguard. Ships crumpled, sucked into the void. The command vessel veered, but too late, its edge caught, shearing off in a burst of escaping atmosphere. Alarms wailed as the backlash hit the Odyssey. Elena's vision blurred, the bridge spinning. Marcus yelled something about containment breach, but his voice faded into the roar. In that moment, as the stars smeared into streaks, Elena wondered if the cost was worth it. The reply had ended their war, perhaps, but the command center hummed with the low thrum of failing generators, their lights flickering like dying stars across the reinforced walls. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white, as the final data streams poured in from the orbital relays. Beside her, Marcus hunched over the auxiliary panel, his fingers flying across the keys with the precision of a man who'd long ago traded hope for habit. In the corner, Dr. Singh paced, his usual calm fractured by the weight of what they'd unleashed, or what they'd refused to stop. "You sure about this?" Marcus muttered, not looking up. His voice cut through the tension, rough as gravel. The plan had been simple at the start: decode the alien signal, the one that had pierced Earth's defenses with its cold demand for surrender. "You wanted war," it had said, a declaration from a fleet blotting out the sun. But their reply, the one Elena had crafted, laced with human history's unfiltered fury, our wars, our triumphs, our unbreakable will, had ricocheted back in ways no simulation predicted. Elena nodded, though doubt clawed at her gut. The aliens' response wasn't invasion, it was something worse. A mirror. Their technology, vast and indifferent, had absorbed the signal and broadcast it back amplified not just to their ships but into every human network, every mind-linked implant, every corner of the globe. It wasn't destruction by beam or bomb. It was revelation. The full weight of humanity's legacy, unedited, flooding the collective consciousness. The genocides, the holocausts, the quiet cruelties of everyday survival. No one could unsee it. Cities had ground to a halt as billions recoiled from the truth of what we were. Singh stopped pacing, his eyes fixed on the central hologram. The alien fleet hung there, motionless now, their formation a perfect geometric bloom against the void. "The cost," he whispered. "We showed them us and they showed us back. But look, their signatures are fading. They're withdrawing." Marcus snorted, slamming the execute key. The last firewall engaged with a soft chime, severing the link before the feedback loop could consume the bunker's systems. Alarms blared briefly, then silenced. Outside, through the narrow viewport, the sky was clear for the first time in days. No more the shadow of hulls, just the faint trail of retreating exhaust plumes streaking toward the stars. Elena leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. They'd won in a way. The aliens hadn't fired a shot. Their reply had broken something fundamental in us, forcing a reckoning we couldn't ignore. Riots still echoed in the distant feeds, governments toppled, alliances shattered under the glare of our own history. But the fleet was gone, repelled not by weapons but by the raw, unflinching honesty of human grit. We'd stared into the abyss and it had blinked. As the lights steadied, Marcus clapped a hand on her shoulder, a rare grin cracking his face. "Told you ingenuity beats invasion. Now what? Rebuild from the ashes?" Singh glanced at the viewport, where the first hints of dawn pierced the horizon. "We adapt. Always have." The words hung, simple and earned, as the world outside began to stir, not in triumph but in the quiet resolve of survivors. Civilization as they knew it was ended, but from the ruins something new would rise. Human, flawed and unyielding,